This is Radio Now 95.3 FM. Come for the news, stay for informed conversations.
7 days ago, Nigeria and indeed the whole world was greeted with a horrifying story of a 10-year-old girl named Happiness who was hospitalized with burn marks all over her body. Now the news would get even grimmer as it was revealed that the child was tortured by her employer, Adachuku Chukere Okafo, a lawyer who has since gone on the run. Nigeria is a signatory to the Child Rights Act, and this morning we're joined by Hassana Mena, who is the Executive Director of ASVIOL Support Initiative, to talk about child rights and this particular horrifying situation that we have been greeted by. Good morning, Ms. Mena, and thank you for joining us on the conversation.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
What was your reaction to this latest case of child abuse that we have witnessed in Nigeria?
I think it's sad that we have normalized this. It's almost unfortunate that this is our reality in Nigeria. Almost every home you go to, you see an underaged person serving as a house help. That in itself is abuse. And then you get to see cases of, the employers abusing these children that first things first are underaged, and even under the labor laws should not be employed for paid service, should be under the care of their parents. But I think this is what happens in a country where institutions are not strong enough to protect the rights of the vulnerable. It was a disappointing story to read. But sadly, and I'm just really sad that, it has become so normalized that it's almost like, we just sigh and we move on.
Ms. Mena, I go back to the legal instruments, right? So we have the Child Rights Act at national level. We know that hasn't been domesticated across all 36 states. We're a signatory to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. All of these laws are, I dare say, I don't want to say perfect in themselves, because these laws typically will be tweaked as we go on. However, I wonder if we're not... If we're focusing on the right place. Culturally, we have had children who take on household chores that typically they shouldn't be taking on. So is this a case of fighting between the legal aspect and just how Nigerians across the country culturally approach family life and upbringing and whatnot?
So basically what the law is supposed to do is also to change cultures. Because prior to now, prior to the law, saying killing of twins is no longer legal, it was people's cultures to kill twins, Culture comes with so many things that at the end of the day are vices. So the laws are supposed to end these things. They're supposed to stop these things. But what we find in Nigeria is, because of the lack of political will to implement some of these laws, and then because of the long process of even domesticating these laws, like you rightly said, we are, signatory to the Child Rights Act. So why is it then the Child Rights Convention? Why is it that Nigeria has still not, been able to domesticate it in certain states? The National Assembly have passed it. Why is it that some states have still not been able to pass this law? And that's just the first step, because after passing the law, we then have to see implementation, and things just end up being very slowly done in Nigeria. I remember fighting for the VAP Act, that's the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act, and even after getting it domesticated across some of these states, implementation is still such a hard struggle, such a hard work. You have to create awareness on this, but at the end of the day, there must be political will, because the best way to deter people from committing such crimes is to punish one person, to be made an example of. You have someone that is an underaged in your house, and you're giving them so much, labor, you punish the people that have let their children to come to, that person, like the richer, or whoever is exploiting you, that you have let your child to be exploited, and you that you're exploiting the child. Once you're able to punish these people appropriately according to the law, you would deter other people from doing such, and gently, slowly we will change our culture. But I really do not understand where this even comes from, this culture of ours that we look at children as tools for exploitation. Perhaps because of the patriarchal nature of of the culture that we have allowed. But change must come, because one happiness is one too many. We cannot keep on burying our children. We cannot keep on burning our children. We cannot keep on abusing our children. Like, this cannot be the life that that we expose little children to.
Miss Maina, if I may, I mean, I hear you when you refer to just the patriarchal nature of our society. However, when you think about the abuse children suffer, it's twofold. You have the bit where there's underage marriage, where girls typically suffer more. But of course, you come to the more recent reports are around the abuse in and of itself. And the people who've been identified as culprits in those cases are women. Right? We have too many cases where it's the woman who was in charge of the household that beat, brutalized, and assaulted a young girl or a young boy, whatever the case may be. So in situations like that, would we say it's the patriarchal nature of our society?
Yes, because we're all victims of patriarchy, whether or not we like it. And, even in the hierarchy of abuse, it's like, oh, this abuse this person, and then that, translates to, because at the end of the day, it's all about power, So we must fix our society in of itself, we must fix it from, the negative effects of patriarchy, that we now have a situation whereby, we've almost allowed that a person that has more power should, be able to abuse people that are vulnerable. And when I say like the patriarchal nature of our society, this is exactly what I mean. The ideals of patriarchy, the culture that just allows people that are more powerful to just get away with certain things, and in it of itself, also like the cycle that this kind of culture also creates. So that is what I meant by the patriarchal culture that we enable and we allow to continue, and just translates to every other facet of our lives as human beings in this country.
Well, Ms. Maina, if I can understand this, we haven't exactly domesticated the Child Rights Act, but in this particular situation, what sort of response should we expect from the authorities in terms of punishing the abuse of 10-year-old Happiness?
I think back to what I said about sighing and moving on, quite unfortunately. But personally, because I'm a lawyer as well, I would expect to start saying, civil rights organizations take up this case, and follow it to the end. Because most of the time when we leave this for prosecutors, that's government prosecutors, to follow this to the end, we almost never end up getting reports back, as to what has happened, so it's then safe to assume that the case has been swept under the carpet. But, I really hope that human rights organizations, and some CSOs will take this up and follow it to the end, and ensure that whatever punishment or, whatever remedies that the law provides, it's been able to be followed to the end.
Ms. Maina, thank you very much for speaking with us this morning. Our guest on this conversation was the Executive Director of ASVO Support Initiative, Ms. Hassana Maina, and she joined us to speak on the Child Rights Act, as well as, more specifically, the abuse of 10-year-old Happiness by her employer and perhaps guardian, Adachuku Chukere Okafo, who brutalized the young lady so much so that she had to be hospitalized. We're going to bring you details on this particular conversation as it unfolds, but for now, we turn our sights to the conversations on our dailies as the news review comes up in just a moment.
This is Radio Now 95.3 FM.